Welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My name is Alice Lee Hagan. We all try to make a difference, and as a host of ThinkTech Hawaii, I've been privileged to be able to talk to a diverse number of people, from corporate executives to leaders to educators, entrepreneurs, and students. They all try to make a difference, whether it be in their community or internationally. No difference for the guest that I have today, and he is joining us from California via Skype. Todd Reese is the Director of Human Resource at the Castle Medical Center. Welcome, Todd. It's really nice to have you, and as I mentioned earlier on, I realize that you're on travel or business travel, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do the interview with us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you, Alice.
Well, I guess when I first got in touch with you, probably almost a year ago, right, through a colleague of yours who is no longer working at Castle, she mentioned that I should talk to you because you are interested in getting involved in the university. And then I saw the things that you do prior to joining Castle Medical Center here. So maybe first of all, tell us a little bit about what you do. You've been with Castle for the last 2 years as the Director of Human Resource, correct?
That's right, yeah. I've been at Castle Medical Center, which, as most viewers in Hawaii would probably know, is the primary healthcare provider for Windward, Oahu. Mm-hmm. We're registered for 160 beds, and we serve communities from Waimanalo all the way up to Kahuku.
Now, you've been there 2 years, so, how does it feel living here and doing, I guess, being involved in this profession?
Well, it was a bit of a change for me from my previous profession, mm-hmm. But this is, I guess in anything that you do, there's ways that you can make a difference, a positive impact in the community that you're in. And I feel strongly that, that's something Castle is really working to do for the communities on Windward, Oahu, mm-hmm. to change them, make them healthier, to heal the whole person as opposed to just physical healing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have so many questions to ask you about your previous profession. As I said at the beginning, like a lot of people here, you made it, well, you're still making a difference, but in your previous position with ADRA International, it was a humanitarian organization, and I guess, let me see, it stands for Adventist Development and Relief Agency. So tell us a little bit about ADRA.
ADRA, or ADRA, as we say for short, it's a humanitarian organization. It's currently operating in about 130 countries. And generally, they focus the areas of social justice, disaster relief, developing economic opportunities, specific children focused projects like protecting vulnerable children through nutrition and educational support. They also focus on women and girls, empowering women and girls, community health, and then, of course, water, sanitation, hygiene all kind of go together. Mm-hmm. If you make positive inroads in those areas, you make real impacts in people's health and the communities. Mm-hmm. Then hunger and nutrition, and also livestock and agriculture are kind of the areas that they're focusing in around the world.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a huge spectrum of areas that they focus on. So how long has this agency been around then?
Really, it started since the 1950s is when they came. Really, the first activities began after World War II, when they started providing aid to refugees from World War II and providing food and clothing and shelter back at that time. Mm-hmm. It had a different name at that point. It was called SAWS, which was the Seventh Adventist World Service. Okay. But as it grew, it became more needed throughout the world to really have an impact. Back in the early 80s, they changed the name to ADRA, mm-hmm. and also they had more structure changes where they regionalized offices around the world and kind of had a little bit more governance and really developed into a more robust network.
Now, before I go into details and asking you all the things that they do, but how did you get involved in ADRA?
Well, that is a great question. I was a senior in college with finishing a degree in international communication and Spanish, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I wasn't really clear because with that degree, there's a variety of things you could do. It was that was one of the reasons I picked it. But then it became also the bane of my existence in my senior year in college. What am I actually going to do with it? And then I stumbled upon the field of humanitarian aid and decided that that was really an interesting path for me. And I ended up getting an internship. I applied multiple different places and managed to get an internship with ADRA in Cambodia. And it was an internship in communications as a communications manager there. So I stayed there for about a year as a communications manager. While I was there, someone from the headquarters came out, and I worked with her for a week to film projects and do some marketing stuff. And after that week, she invited me back to a position at the headquarters office in Maryland. So I ended up working there for about 4 years. And doing marketing during that time, I was essentially traveling 2 or 3 international trips a year to a couple countries each trip, and just seeing just a ton of the work that they do, a lot of the great work. It was a great time. I would go around with a cameraman, and we would film for their TV show. I would write news articles and marketing stories for them too.
So that's what you did for your entire duration at ADRA. So it's really communications related then?
Well, actually, no. That was just the first part. During that time, I finished up a master's degree a master's in business administration from the University of Maryland. And after I finished it, they asked me to take over as an administrator in a country office in Togo, West Africa. So I moved with my wife and my young daughter at the time. She was 18 months, and we moved to Togo, West Africa, which is right next to Ghana. And it kind of between Ghana and Benin, actually right between the two. So, and we lived there for 2 years, and I was basically developing projects in that country, trying to help people. Those projects were based in large part, on women empowerment and economic development. The women in Togo, particularly in the villages where we were working, were pretty disenfranchised. They didn't have much of a voice in their community, and they were looked down upon. So it was part of the change process was if they could develop an income, they had more of a voice, interestingly, and they were able to band together with cooperatives that we helped them form and train them in a skill, in sometimes a traditional skill like tie-dye making tie-dye cloths or basket weaving, whatever it was in their particular area that was kind of traditional, that they could have an income, and then we could sell those things in the capital, and they could develop incomes for their group. Then they began to have more of a voice in their communities. They were able to use that money to send their kids to school. So there's just a lot of positive impact from having them have a source of income. So I did that for 2 years.
Okay. And that was in the 90s, you said?
No, this was 2005.
Oh, 2000. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is happening to the project right now? Is it still ongoing? Do you know what happened? Or what is happening?
They still do have projects ongoing. Of course, those projects do modify over time as needs change in communities or communities change. So they will develop a community to a certain point, and then the hope is that they can carry on by themselves after that. And I know some of those communities have had tremendous impact from those projects. At the time, they were funded by the Swedish government and the Canadian government. We also ended up with a couple projects from the United Kingdom and Germany in water. So really it was when you're out there in the fields, you're looking for income sources wherever you can find them. And a lot of times there are government agencies that are providing it. And so there's a lot of grant writing and research and things like that.
Well, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you kind of anticipated my question because at the end, with all the work that you do at ADRA around the globe, you probably need a lot of funding. And so it's based a lot on government funds. You have to write grants. Are you personally, or were you personally involved in grant writing, or how does that work?
Certainly, it worked a couple different ways. Mm-hmm. So, yes, there is a big need for large funding and millions of dollars to carry on a lot of work that's going on. Particularly later, as I developed through my career, there were some bigger projects that I was working on. So it works a couple different ways. When I was in Togo, West Africa, I had someone that reported to me that was a grant writer, essentially, and they would develop programs, but I was heavily involved in the oversight of that and giving direction as to where I thought we would get the most impact. And then later on, when I was working later in my career, I was working at our headquarters again in our emergency management department, which I haven't gotten to yet, but I can explain that in a second.
Yeah.
But there we had a team of grant writers, and I was on the program side managing projects. And so I had a lot of input as a technical expert for emergency management. And so it was kind of it was a collaboration between a team. We had, finance people that would give input. We'd have our grant writers, of course, and then the whatever technical experts we needed, whether it was water or shelter or children or whatever the project was about, they would provide input and kind of best practices, what they thought we should be doing.
I see. Now, Todd, we're actually coming on our first break, but you've in that brief response, you talked about so many things that I have more questions about. Now, you talked about being in the emergency management side and some other bigger projects that you work on. And of course, before we started this interview, you sent me some pictures, and I'd like to share that with the audience when we come back from our break. How's that?
Sounds good. Thanks, Alice.
Great. My guest today is Todd Reese. He is the Director of Human Resource at Castle Medical Center. Prior to joining Castle Medical Center 2 years ago, he was working with ADRA, which stands for Adventist Development and Relief Agency. You've been watching Think Tech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. We'll be right back after the break.
Aloha. My name is Jim Sean, and I'm host of a show called Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. Each week, live streaming at noon on Think Tech Hawaii, we interview people who have special insights into education, from early education through K-12, all the way through higher education and beyond. Both public and private are areas we're interested in. We dig deeper. We try to find out what it's really like to be involved in making change, advocating for it, how you reform, what people's philosophies are in reforming it. As I said, we're live streaming every Wednesday at noon on Think Tech Hawaii. And later on, you can find these interviews on YouTube and on the Hawaii Educational Policy Center website. We hope you join us as many times as possible. Aloha.
Welcome back to Think Tech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. If you're just joining us, our conversation today is with Todd Reese, the Director of Human Resource at Castle Medical Center. Formerly, he was with ADRA, Adventist Development and Relief Agency, working in different countries in Cambodia and West Africa on humanitarian projects. So Todd, let me ask our producer to share some of the pictures that you sent to us. I presume you took those pictures on, I guess, when you were living there then, is that correct?
Yes, the pictures are photos that I did take. And
so with this one, tell us a little bit about the background of this little girl.
I can't quite see it yet, but
Okay.
if it's a little girl
With an orange outfit, and
yes,
yeah.
this is a picture from Angola. I traveled to Angola during shortly after some civil conflict that they had, and we were looking at a project that they were doing with livestock, where they were training people to take better care of their livestock, where really they had no veterinary skills and their livestock were dying, and so it's really how to improve their chances. And there, of course, livestock is is very much tied into survival and income. So for them, that was a big impact, so they could take care of their animals better, have a source of milk and also food, and sell them if they need to in some cases.
Did you actually see through to the end of this project? Did you, and what kind of feedback did you get from the local?
This project in particular, I was only there for a short time, but I know from what I experienced, from what I saw, the locals are very happy with the project. There was a positive impact in terms of their ability to survive with the nutrition that they were getting from their animals, and they were overall they were very happy. I'm sorry I don't have any data or statistics.
Oh, no, that's okay. Now, my producer is showing another picture. I presume this is a little boy, and not much else I can tell you. I think he's wearing some kind of necklace ornament. He has a little frown.
Yeah, this is just kind of a typical child out in a village in Togo. He has a slingshot around his neck, which was...
That's a slingshot.
Yeah, he used that for hunting. And this was in the maritime region of Togo in the south. And just one of the villages we were working in, he was there. Actually, I believe at this shot, we were, as it's coming into view now, we were doing some HIV/AIDS education and training and awareness, which was very critical in those areas. HIV prevention was, of course, very, very important for those communities.
Todd, tell us about your relationship with these people. What is it like? And how about we hold on to that question first? My producer is displaying another picture. Two girls. One is looking at the camera, and the other one you only see at the background kind of profile. Is it also in Togo?
Yeah, these are also in Togo. These are, again, girls just out there in the maritime region of Togo. This is an example of just what you would see from the girls. Really, it was important to work with the girls, young girls and women, to empower them. Girls would be the second ones to go to school. If families could often only afford to send one child to school, and it would be the boy. So part of what we're doing when we were empowering those women through those women empowerment projects was to increase the chances that the girls would also get to go to school as well.
Right. Let me go back to that question. I'm sorry. Let's have you talk about this picture as well, Todd. A group of women in flowery dress, and I think they are doing some kind of projects.
Yeah, great example of what I was just talking about. Here, these women were taking a local. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the English word for it. It would be taro. I think would be similar to taro.
Okay.
And they would grind it into flour.
Okay.
They were grinding into flour.
Okay.
And they would then sell that on the market. So they were both growing it and then processing it, and that was how they were generating income in their community.
Interesting. I guess we do that with the local Hawaiian culture. Taro is also very important.
Yeah, it's similar to taro, but it's not exactly taro. Right.
Okay, so let me go back to my question earlier on. What's your relationship like with all these people you met, whether they be in Togo or Cambodia? Perhaps talk about Togo, because you've lived there for a while, or you had lived there for a while.
Yeah, in Togo, it was, you know, there's people that you interact with on a daily basis in Togo, for example, the employees I would have at our headquarters, at our main office there. And those relationships become very close. You know, you go to their weddings and funerals, and you get to know them well and become part of their community. Out in the rural areas, there were some communities that I was pretty connected to because I would be able to visit them more frequently, and others that you would pass through on a less frequent basis. So there was one in particular that I remember that was, they would always be happy to see me, and I think if I even went back today, there'd be a lot of people that would remember me coming through and, you know, making a difference. People tend to remember when you make a difference in their community, whether it's building a school or helping them with health issues. What becomes a challenge is when you see so much need, not being able to help everybody. And that becomes difficult on a personal level. Not being able to always make a difference. I mean, there would be some cases where you would see people that needed help, and you knew that you could only help so many, so you may not be able to help those, or we would try to help those who were most vulnerable and who had the most need.
I'm glad you brought up that point because obviously I've never done anything like this before, as courageous like you, going overseas to help them. I remember when I was, quite some years ago, during the Yugoslavian War, I had the honor to teach English to all these professionals, refugees coming from that part of the world. And like what you say, you try to make a difference, but at the end, you say, how much can you help? And I couldn't draw a line between my professional life and personal life, and I had to give up teaching because it was difficult. So I guess my question for you is, how do you accept this fact that, okay, there is really not, you can't do everything to help everybody. It's not just for you, but for all the other humanitarian workers out there. How do you deal with that fact?
Well, it certainly can be challenging, particularly in emergency response situations where if people are not getting help, then they die. And those are the most challenging situations. But what you have to remember is that, and the only way to survive really doing this as a career is to remember that even making a difference in one person's life and focusing on those people that you're able to help and the difference that that's going to make as opposed to those that you can't. There's a world of need, and there's virtually an unlimited amount of people that need help out there, and not enough resources right now or people to deploy them to help them all. So that's what it comes down to, is who can I help and what is the impact going to be in their life.
So how did you define that? You started talking about the, I guess, emergency management projects that you were involved in. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I know that our producer showed a picture earlier on of a little girl. Is that part of a different project that you were involved in?
It was. Actually, that little girl, she was in a what we would call an internally displaced camp because after the Haiti earthquake. So internally displaced is essentially a refugee, but in their own country. A refugee goes across international borders. So this girl here was in a makeshift camp that just sprung up right after the Haiti earthquake of 2010. Excuse me.
That's all right. Did you visit the Haiti after the earthquake?
Haiti was a country that I spent quite a bit of time in. After the earthquake, I was managing our response there. And I think over a course of 2 years, I made about 10 trips there for various lengths of time. So did everything from managing emergency food distributions to 300,000 people 2 weeks after the earthquake. Excuse me. To then moving from the direct intervention of handing food and water and shelter as out to long-term recovery solutions like shelter projects, sanitation projects, water, and other projects like that that would help them recover on a long-term basis.
You said you had gone back and forth about 10 times during that period of time to help out the country. So when you return back here to the U.S., what are some of the questions that people ask you? Because, you know, we get certain perspectives in the media, but you were on the ground. Do you see things differently? What are some of the questions that people will ask you when you came back home?
Well, you know, some of the toughest questions come from your family. So I remember at one point we had a very large snowstorm while I was gone during that first part of just immediately after the earthquake. It was in February. We were living in Maryland, and I was asked by my daughter how come I had to go for their emergency when they were having an emergency at home.
Oh my gosh.
Those are sorts of, and you know, they had 5 feet of snow in just about a week, so it was pretty serious, and they had to shovel out themselves while I was in Haiti. So, and I really didn't even know what was going on because of communication and that sort of thing. So, those are the tough questions that you get. They can be hard to respond to.
Right. So, besides Haiti, what other emergency response projects were you involved in?
I was also heavily involved in emergency response projects in Yemen, and also emergency responses in, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Sudan, South Sudan. But Yemen was very close, I think, to my something that I enjoyed. I've been to a lot of countries around the world, more than 50. And Yemen was one that just stood out as being very unique and interesting, and it was a fascinating place to both visit and also work there. So
that is a good place to keep our audience tuned to our next segment, because I want to ask you why Yemen was so special for you. So we're coming on a second break, so we'll continue with that afterwards. How's that? Great.
Sure.
My guest today is Todd Reese, the Director of Human Resource at Castle Medical Center, and he was formerly with the agency Adventist Development and Relief Agency. You've been watching Think Tech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. We'll be right back after the break.
Aloha, my name is Justine Espiritu, and I co-host Hawaii Farmers Series with Matthew Johnson of Oahu Fresh. We talk about Hawaii's local farmers and their supporters. In order to have a vibrant and sustainable local food system, farmers are always the foundation, but there's so many other people involved in the community that help support those farmers. So we bring those folks onto our show every Thursday at 4 p.m. We get their backstory, their history, find out a little more about them, and we find out why they love what they do and their perspective and their advice on how we can continue to have a dynamic and vibrant and sustainable local food system. So we broadcast live every Thursday at 4 p.m. and you can also catch us on ThinkTech's YouTube channel as well as Alelo 54. So we hope you tune in and join us. Thank you.
Welcome back to Think Tech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. If you're just joining us, my guest today is Todd Reese, the Director of Human Resource at Castle Medical Center. Our conversation earlier on was about his international humanitarian experience with ADRA, or Adventist Development and Relief Agency. So Todd, tell us about why Yemen is so special for you.
Well, you know, after a while, it seemed that to me, after I was traveling a lot around the world, I was traveling internationally about 40% of the time, and maybe it was just because I was traveling so much, but a lot of the countries and places I was going to started to blend together and look the same. And but when I got to Yemen, it was very different. You know, they have a very old culture there, of course. The ancient city in Sana'a, and the capital city of Sana'a, looks like it's straight out of biblical times, it's just very unique architecture. Of course, I love Middle Eastern food, so that was great for me. And the people and the customs, and it was all very fascinating for me and very new, as opposed to some of the other places, which, once you've been to a lot of those other places, then this was just very new for me.
Could you tell us, when you were in Yemen, what project were you doing or overseeing?
Sure. We had, there was a couple projects. They were funded by the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and I was managing 2 projects. One was focused on internally displaced people and doing kind of vocational training for them there in the capital city of Sana'a, and actually refugees too. Then the other one was a water project that was providing water to people displaced by internal conflict in Yemen. So that was a very interesting project because we were working in places that were very challenging to get to. They were fraught with conflict. There were conflict zones. They were hard to get to verify stuff was going on. But I was, for example, one of the first people from our office to actually be able to get out and see some of the work and verify that it was actually happening the right way out in some of the areas.
Wow. This question just came to my head, and I guess you've worked with a lot of refugees, whether they are internal displaced or otherwise. What do you think about the situation that's happening in Europe right now?
Certainly, I think there's a lot of people that need help. I'm a little bit from my what I've seen. I guess in my personal opinion, there's 2 different types. There's a couple different types of refugees that I'm seeing. So the types that we were seeing were the refugees who had nothing. They had come with nothing on their backs. They had come with. They were just grateful to get clean water and any food that they could get. And they were so grateful to have those things and just to be alive, frankly. They'd come out of war zones and conflict zones. I guess what I've seen for some of the refugees that are going into Europe is that they have expectations of a different lifestyle, and for some of them at least, it seems like they're coming to migrate as opposed as to be actual refugees. Now, some of them I'm sure are actual refugees from the Syrian conflict and would have a similar attitude, but there seems to be a mix there.
Now, let's take this to perhaps some personal questions that I'd like to ask you. I know that at the beginning, when you said you started working at Togo, your family was with you. So did they go to all these projects, travels with you? How did it work out for you, between you and your family?
Well, generally my family was in the capital city. We would go out and travel sometimes. They would come out and do a day out to the projects with me that weren't too far away from home. But certainly we had some concerns about the availability of medical care and wanted to be a little bit closer there around the capital where you had a little bit better medical care in case of an accident or something like that. It just was non-existent out where we were. So they would come sometimes, but we were cognizant of the fact that we didn't want to be too far away. I
see. Well, you mentioned that when you went to Yemen, I presume you went on your own. How was it for your family? I mean, as you commented earlier on, your daughter was asking you, well, you had to deal with the emergency in Haiti. What about our emergency here? Was that challenging for you?
It was definitely challenging. It was, Yemen's not a very safe place, of course. It's home to Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and they were active at the time when I was there in some of the regions that I was in, and one time I was, hunkered down in the back of a pickup, in the back of a truck while an Al Qaeda motorcycle was driving by. So I was, hiding out there. So, it was definitely a bit risky, and that's one of the reasons I ended up coming to Castle Medical Center, is because the places I was going, and it wasn't, the people needed help, but I kind of felt with a young family that I needed to be responsible also to my own family,
right.
and to do what was right by them. So that was one of the reasons that I applied for the position at Castle Medical Center and ended up transferring over here to Hawaii.
Yeah. Well, you commented that it's risky, and it's certainly not an understatement, considering all the stories that we've heard about unfortunate incidents happening to humanitarian workers. Do you think that things have changed in terms of humanitarian work? Is it more dangerous nowadays than, say, when you joined as a young intern in Cambodia several years back?
Certainly, I think that terrorist organizations have started to see aid workers as more targets in some countries, and that has made it more risky for aid workers. The instances and the numbers of attacks on humanitarian aid workers has increased. If you looked at it from even just the last 15 years, you would see that the amount has increased, and it's a lot more humanitarian aid workers that are getting injured, killed, or hurt now than a decade ago.
I'm glad you came back here, but having traveled, and you mentioned that you traveled to over 50 countries, was it difficult for you to grow roots in some ways, because you've always been in different parts of the world?
Well, that's a great question, and to be honest, I think I was done with it. I think I was ready to move on. When I look back at my time, I had some great experiences, and it was great for professional growth. And one of the things that I learned was working amongst many different cultures and different types of people, and being flexible. And from what I've learned about working in Hawaii, which is a very multicultural state, those skills have just become very valuable for me there. So I think Hawaii is a great place to be. I'm happy to put roots down here, and I think it's a great place for my family. So that we're so excited to be here. And after all the places we have been, it's just kind of like a dream come true.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, I know that you probably have a lot of memorable experiences during your career, international career. Besides Yemen, are there some other incidents or places that have a significant impact on you and your family, perhaps?
When we were in Togo, some of the impacts and things that I remember were my daughter. She had malaria on three different occasions that we know of. And so that was, those sorts of things stick with you. I remember getting stuck between two borders once when they closed the border between Ghana and Togo while I was in between, and I was trapped there and couldn't get out. So it was like being in no man's land with nowhere to go. So there's a lot of stories there that are fun to share. Being chased, I remember one time in Uganda, some Batwa pygmies were angry with us and chased us out of their village, for example. So it was very, very interesting stuff that's happened. Lots of
You've got a lot of great memories. Now, how old is your daughter right now, Todd?
My daughter's 12, and I also have two boys who are 8 and 5.
So if they one day tell you that, Dad, I'd like to do the same thing that you did, going overseas and be aid workers, what would you say to them?
I'd be happy if they did something like that. I think it's a really meaningful career. There's a lot of purpose in it. You know that you're having an impact on people's lives, and the experiences that you gain are, for the most part, just wonderful experiences, and they're tough to get other places. The picture that's being shown now, for example, that's a girl that was able to go to school because of the projects we were doing. So imagine the impact on her life. You know, a lot of girls her age don't even know how to read or write, where she is there in Togo, in that village, and there she is sitting in a class full of boys.
I think that's why it's great to be able to talk to you about this, because we take it so much for granted that we have education, we have clean water, girls and boys can go to school, but that's not true for everyone in the world.
No, it's not, and we are very blessed in our country, and to be in a developed country, even simple things like running water, you know, so many people just have to go down to the river and get the water, then they come back, and if they don't boil it, then they're getting sick with multiple diseases, schistosomiasis or other types of diseases that really just cripple them or have a negative health impact. So sanitation, I mean, all these things that are so positive and making just a great impact on their lives. And of course, being there after a disaster, when the people are at their most critical need.
Now, my last question for you is, now at Castle Medical Center, I presume, like a lot of people here, you're a professional, you sit at a desk or you go meet with people. Was it a difficult adjustment for you? Because I imagine when you were an aid worker with ADRA, you were constantly under pressure. So was it a big adjustment for you to come and work here at Castle Medical?
Actually, no. It was. You know, a lot of aid work is done at desks or behind computers too. You're doing project work. You're looking at budgets. So there's a lot of that goes on, and then the actual field work going out there is, you know, not as frequent as some people might think, but it definitely goes on. But for example, I said I traveled probably 40% of the time, and so 60% of the other work was behind my desk at the headquarters office, but the other 40% was out in the field. Wow. And even then, when I was out in the field, I'd be at their office working with some of the team, and we'd be looking at results and outcomes and seeing what we needed to change, and then going out into the field to verify and validate and see how it's working in real life. So it's being behind the desk is really, I don't want people to get the idea that you're out always on an adventure every day. It's still a lot of office work, and it's that's just kind of goes with the territory.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because I have this perception that, okay, it's a lot of pressure, you're always out and about. So that's not necessarily the case. Right?
Not necessarily, but the pressure really is mostly two things. One, you have pressure from donors who they want to see their objectives fulfilled. And you want that too, because if you don't meet those outcomes, then people are at risk. So you want to make sure that you're doing your best for those people who are being benefited by the project. And in much the same way, that's the same at Castle Medical Center.
Right.
We want to make sure we have the best people who are going to take the best care of our patients. If we don't, then patients could be at risk. So it's a similar mindset.
Thank you so much, Todd. And you have done great things, and you are still doing it. It was really, really great sharing this conversation with you, and to have you talk about your experience across the world with ADRA. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a safe trip back tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
My guest today is Todd Reese, the Director of Human Resources at Castle Medical Center, and he has been talking about his international aid work with ADRA International. You've been watching Think Tech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Thank you for joining us. Aloha.